The bell above Thornberry Jewelers chimed as Stellan Ashcroft, Duke of Ashcroft, stepped through the door. The shop smelled of brass polish and old money, glass cases gleaming with sapphires and rubies. He'd come for a simple errand, a birthday gift for his sister Ottilie. But his feet stopped moving 3 steps past the threshold. A woman stood at the counter with her back to him. She wore a pelisse of dark blue wool, faded at the seams, but meticulously maintained. Her bonnet was last season's style. But Stellan would have recognized that posture anywhere. The straight spine, the slight tilt of her head, the way her gloved fingers rested on the counter, as if holding herself upright through sheer will. 8 years. 8 years since he'd seen her, and his pulse lurched like a green boy's at his first ball. Corey Sand, I'm afraid I can't offer more than £12. The jeweler's voice was thin and nasal, deliberately dismissive. The setting is outdated, and sapphires of this size are not particularly fashionable this season. £12? Her voice was steady, but Stellan heard the crack beneath it. Mr. Thornberry, this ring belonged to my grandmother. The sapphire alone is worth 10 times that. Sentiment does not translate to value, madam. If you'd prefer to try elsewhere. I don't have time to try elsewhere. The words came out sharp, then softer, as if she'd caught herself. I need the money today. Stellan's chest constricted. He knew that tone, the careful control of someone who'd run out of options, and was trying desperately not to show it. He'd heard it in the voices of tenants begging for extensions on rent. He'd heard it in soldiers' widows petitioning for pensions. He'd never imagined hearing it from her. What had happened to her? She'd married Viscount Hartwell, a man with a respectable fortune. She should be in a Mayfair townhouse, not standing in a jeweler's shop bargaining over her grandmother's ring. £15, Thornberry said with the air of a man making a great concession. My final offer. Corasanda's shoulders dropped almost imperceptibly. Stellan watched her fingers curl against the counter. Defeat, acceptance, the surrender of someone who'd lost too many battles to keep fighting. Very well, she whispered. £15. Stellan moved before he could think better of it. 35, he said, his voice cutting across the shop like a blade. Corisanda spun around. Her face, God, her face. She was thinner than he remembered, shadows darkening the skin beneath her gray eyes. But she was still beautiful. Still the woman who'd haunted his dreams for nearly a decade. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her lips parted, color flooding her pale cheeks, then draining away just as quickly. Your Grace. The title came out strangled. Lady Hartwell. He kept his voice neutral, though his blood hammered against his throat. Forgive the interruption. I couldn't help but overhear your negotiation. Her eyes darted to Thornberry, then back to Stellan, horror and humiliation warring across her features. This is not... £35, Stellan repeated, turning to the jeweler. For whatever this lady is selling, I'll take it. Your Grace, I cannot allow... Corisanda stepped toward him, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. He met her gaze and held it, willing her to see what he couldn't say aloud. I understand that Mr. Thornberry was about to commit highway robbery in broad daylight. £35, sir. Or shall I take my considerable business elsewhere? Thornberry's face went through a remarkable series of contortions. Outrage, calculation, fear, obsequiousness, before settling on oily deference. Of course, Your Grace. £35. A more than fair price. Excellent. Stellan reached into his coat and withdrew his pocketbook. The item, if you please. Corisanda's hand shot out, closing around his wrist before he could count out the notes. The touch burned through his gloves, through his sleeve, straight into his blood. I cannot accept this. Her voice was low, fierce. "Whatever you're doing, whatever you think you're doing, I think I'm purchasing a rather fine sapphire ring." Stellan kept his tone light, though his heart was pounding. "Is that not what one does in a jeweler's shop? Don't." The word cracked. "Don't pretend this is ordinary. Don't pretend you happened upon me by chance and decided to buy my grandmother's ring out of casual interest. Would you prefer I let you walk out of here with 15 pounds in your pocket?" She flinched as if he'd struck her. Stellan lowered his voice, conscious of Thornberry watching them with avid curiosity. "Let me help you. Please." "I don't need your help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Not from you." Her gray eyes blazed with something he couldn't name. Pride, pain, a wound that went far deeper than today's humiliation. "Not from someone who—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Not from you." She pulled her hand back, and the absence of her touch left him cold. 35 pounds, Your Grace." Thornberry slid a velvet pouch across the counter. "A pleasure doing business with you." Stellan collected the ring without looking away from Corisanda. She stood rigid, her hands clenched at her sides, her chin lifted with a defiance that made him want to shake her and hold her in equal measure. "Lady Hartwell." He tucked the velvet pouch into his coat. "A word outside, if you please. I have nothing to say to you. Then you can listen while I speak. I need to— Your son is safe at home with your maid Nan." He watched her face go white. "Yes, I know about Tobias. I know about the debts your husband left behind. I know the townhouse was sold 6 months ago, and you've been living in 2 rented rooms above a milliner's shop in Cheapside. I know that ring was the last thing of value you possessed." Her lips trembled. For a terrible moment, he thought she might cry, and the sight would have undone him completely. Instead, she drew herself up, every inch the Earl's daughter she'd been born. "You've been watching me." Not a question. "Yes." "For how long?" "Long enough." "Why?" "Because I've loved you for 8 years. Because I watched you marry another man, and it nearly destroyed me. Because I've spent every day since wondering what might have happened if I'd spoken sooner, acted faster, and been braver. Because you deserve better than this," he said instead. "Because I'm in a position to help, and because I have a proposition that might benefit us both." Corisanda stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she moved toward the door. 5 minutes, she said over her shoulder. "And then, I never want to see you again." Stellan followed her into the gray London afternoon, the sapphire ring burning a hole in his pocket, and wondered how he was supposed to compress 8 years of longing into 5 minutes. He was about to find out. The street outside Thornberry Jewelers was crowded with carriages and pedestrians, the clatter of hooves and wheels drowning out any possibility of private conversation. Corisanda walked quickly, her worn boots clicking against the cobblestones, and Stellan matched her pace, acutely aware of every inch of distance between them. She stopped in a narrow alley between 2 shops, out of sight of the main thoroughfare. Whatever was about to be said needed no witnesses. 5 minutes, she repeated, turning to face him. "Say what you came to say." Now that they were alone, Stellan could see how badly her hands were shaking. She'd tucked them behind her back, but he caught the tremor before she hit it. He wanted to reach for her. He kept his arms at his sides. "Your husband died 18 months ago," he began. 16 months. 16 months. And in that time, you've discovered that the comfortable life you believed you had was built on debt, gambling losses, and lies. Her jaw tightened. "You seem remarkably well informed about my private affairs. I told you, I've been watching." "Why?" The question tore out of her like a wound reopening. Why would the Duke of Ashcroft concern himself with a destitute widow and her child? "We are nothing to you. We have no connection, No claim on your attention or your charity. No connection? He stepped closer, close enough to see the rapid pulse beating at her throat. You think we have no connection? We danced together once, 8 years ago, at the Pemberton Ball. Her voice wavered slightly. That hardly constitutes. We danced together 3 times. Stellan held her gaze. At the Pemberton Ball, the Worthington Musical, and the Ashby Garden Party. You wore blue at the first, yellow at the second, and pink at the third. You laughed when I told you about my brother's disastrous attempt to ride my father's stallion. You said your favorite flower was jasmine because it bloomed at night, when the world was quiet. You asked me about the stars, and I told you the story of Cassiopeia, and you said that vanity was a foolish thing to be punished for, because everyone deserves to believe they're beautiful. Corasanda's face had gone very still. You remember, she whispered. I remember everything. Silence stretched between them, thick with years of things unsaid. Stellan watched emotions flicker across her features. Shock, confusion, something that might have been hope before it was swiftly extinguished. It doesn't matter, she said finally, her voice hardening. Whatever happened then, whatever you think you remember, it doesn't change anything now. I'm a widow, with a child, and no money, and no prospects. You're a duke. We exist in different worlds. We exist in the same world, the same city, the same moment. I'm standing in front of you offering help, and you're too proud to take it. Pride is all I have left. The words came out raw. My husband gambled away my dowry, my inheritance, and every gift my mother ever gave me. He drank himself into debt with every moneylender in London. He died owing £17,000 to men who will collect, from me, from my son, from whatever scraps remain. I have sold everything. The furniture, the silver, the paintings, my wedding dress, my mother's pearls. Her voice cracked. That ring was the last thing. £17,000. She stopped, thrown off balance by the interruption. That's the amount you owe? Stellan asked quietly. What difference does it make? It might as well be 17 million. Not to me. Corisanda stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying I could clear that debt before nightfall. I'm saying I could ensure you never worry about money again, that your son has a proper education and a secure future, and that you live in comfort instead of fear. Why would you do that? Because I love you. Because I've always loved you. Because watching you suffer is a torture I cannot endure. Because I need something from you, he said instead. Her expression shuddered. Ah, there it is. Not what you're thinking, isn't it? Her laugh was bitter. A wealthy man offers a desperate widow money in exchange for, what, Your Grace? My gratitude? My company? Your presence. He cut her off before she could finish the thought he couldn't bear to hear spoken aloud. In public, at my side, for the remainder of the season. Confusion replaced suspicion. I don't understand. My mother has decided I must marry. She's been parading eligible women in front of me for months. The current favorite is Lady Margot Harcourt. Beautiful, wealthy, connected, and absolutely intolerable. I've told my mother I have no interest in marrying anyone, least of all Lady Margot. But she refuses to relent. And what does this have to do with me? If I'm seen pursuing someone else, someone unexpected, someone who captures my attention so thoroughly that Lady Margot's charms pale in comparison, my mother will be forced to reconsider her strategies. By the time the season ends, Lady Margot will have found another target. My mother will have exhausted herself, and we can both go our separate ways. Corisanda was shaking her head. That's absurd. I'm a widow in mourning. I haven't been in society for over a year. No one would believe the Duke of Ashcroft was genuinely interested in the woman I almost courted 8 years ago before she married someone else. Stellan stepped closer. The woman I've never stopped thinking about. The woman who walked away and took something vital with her, something I've never been able to recover. Her breath caught. "They'll believe it," he said softly, "because it's true." The words hung between them, naked and undeniable. Stellan watched her face, watched the war between disbelief and hope and fear, and knew he was asking her to trust him with far more than a business arrangement. "And in exchange?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I play your pretend interest for a few months, and you clear my debts. Your debts, your living expenses, your son's education, a house of your own when this is over. References that will open any door you choose. Everything you need to rebuild your life. That's too much. It's nothing." He reached into his coat and withdrew the velvet pouch. "This is yours. I won't pretend otherwise." She looked at the sapphire ring in his outstretched palm, then back at his face. "Why are you really doing this?" she whispered. "Because 8 years ago I was too slow. Because you married Hartwell while I was still trying to find the courage to speak. Because I've spent every day since wondering what would have happened if I'd told you the truth. Because everyone deserves a second chance," he said. "Will you let me give you one?" Coruscant closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. "I need to think," she said. "This is too much to decide in an alley." "Of course." He pressed the ring into her hand. "Take this. Take time. I'll call on you tomorrow for your answer." Her fingers closed around the velvet pouch, and for a moment, their hands touched. "Tomorrow," she echoed. Then she turned and walked away, and Stellan watched her disappear into the crowd, his chest tight with something between hope and fear. He'd laid his cards on the table. Now everything depended on what she decided to do with them. The rooms above the milliner's shop were smaller than Stellan had imagined. 2 cramped spaces with sloping ceilings, a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table with mismatched chairs. Everywhere, signs of careful economy. Patched curtains, mended linens, a single candle. This was where she'd been living. This was where she'd brought her son. Coruscant stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if holding the pieces together. Behind her, on the bed, a small boy slept with the absolute abandon of childhood, his dark hair tumbling across the pillow. "His name is Tobias," she said without turning around. "Toby. He's nearly 6 years old. He doesn't understand why we had to leave our house, why his toys were sold, why we eat bread and broth instead of roast beef. He just knows that things are different now, and he trusts me to make them right." Stellan stood in the doorway, afraid to step further into her world without permission. "He looks like you." "He has his father's chin." A pause. "Thank God that's all he inherited." "Coruscant. I thought about your offer." She finally turned to face him, and he could see she hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair was simply pinned, without the careful arrangement of the day before. "I thought about it all night. I made lists of reasons to refuse. Reasons it was foolish. Reasons it was dangerous. Reasons it would only lead to more pain. And I kept coming back to the same conclusion." She gestured toward the sleeping child. "He deserves better than this. He deserves a real home, a proper education, a future that isn't shadowed by his father's debts. If pretending to be courted by you for a few months can give him that." She trailed off, her jaw set with determination. "I'll do it," she said. "Whatever you need, however long it takes, I'll play the part." Something loosened in Stellan's chest, relief and triumph, and a terror he hadn't expected. This was what he'd wanted. So why did it feel like standing at the edge of a cliff? There will be conditions, he said carefully, on both sides. Name them. First, you'll move into Ashcroft House, you and Tobias both. There are nursery rooms that haven't been used in 20 years, and a garden where he can play. My sister Ottilie will be delighted to have company. Khorasan's eyes widened. Live in your house? That's highly improper. You'll be presented as a family friend, recently widowed, in need of support during a difficult time. Ottilie will serve as your chaperone and sponsor. There's nothing improper about a duke's sister taking in a struggling widow. Your mother will never allow it. My mother will do as I say. His voice hardened slightly. She is the Dowager Duchess. I am the Duke. Ashcroft House is mine to manage as I see fit. Khorasan studied him for a long moment. You've thought about this. I've thought about little else for the past 24 hours. What are your other conditions? Stellan moved further into the room, careful not to wake the sleeping child. Second, you'll need a new wardrobe. Society will be watching closely. Every dress, every accessory will be scrutinized. I'll arrange accounts with the finest modistas and milliners. You'll want for nothing. I can't accept. You can, and you will. This arrangement only works if people believe I'm genuinely pursuing you. That requires you to look the part of a woman being courted by a duke. She pressed her lips together, but didn't argue. Third, Stellan continued, we'll need to establish our history. People will ask how we reconnected, why I'm suddenly interested in a widow I supposedly haven't seen in years. We'll tell them a version of the truth, that we knew each other before your marriage, that I recently discovered your circumstances and was moved to help, that renewed acquaintance rekindled old feelings. Old feelings? Her voice was carefully neutral. On my part, yes, that's the story we'll tell. And on my part, gratitude, perhaps, growing admiration, the slow thaw of a wounded heart learning to trust again. He held her gaze. Whatever you're comfortable portraying. Khorasanda was quiet for a long moment. Then, what are my conditions? Stellan blinked. Your conditions? You have yours. I have mine. She lifted her chin, and he saw a flash of the spirited girl he remembered. First, my son is never used as leverage, never paraded about for sympathy or spectacle. He stays in the nursery, protected from society's gaze, until I decide he's ready. Agreed. Second, I'm not a charity case. Whatever you spend on this arrangement, the debts, the wardrobe, the living expenses, I want an accounting. When this is over, when I've established myself properly, I intend to repay you. That's not necessary. It's necessary to me. Her eyes flashed. I won't spend the rest of my life owing you. Either I repay the debt, or there's no arrangement. Stellan hesitated, then nodded slowly. Very well, though I reserve the right to forgive the debt at any time. And I reserve the right to refuse that forgiveness. Despite everything, he felt his lips twitch. You've grown thorns since I saw you last. I've grown survival instincts. She didn't smile. Third condition. When this ends, when you've achieved whatever you're trying to achieve with your mother, it ends cleanly. No drawn-out farewells, no lingering complications. You go your way, I go mine, and we owe each other nothing. The words landed like stones in his chest. He'd expected them. He'd even planned for them. But hearing her speak so casually of their parting made something inside him rebel. Agreed, he said, because what else could he say? Then we have an arrangement. Khorasan extended her hand, formal as any business transaction. When do we begin? Stellan took her hand in his. Her fingers were cold, even through her gloves, and he had to fight the urge to warm them between his palms. Tomorrow evening. My sister is hosting a small dinner party. Intimate, only 20 guests, but carefully chosen. People who gossip. People who'll spread the word. You'll be introduced as our guest of honor. Tomorrow? Alarm flickered across her features. I don't have anything suitable to wear. I haven't been in society for... A modiste will call on you this afternoon. Emergency alterations can be arranged. By tomorrow evening, you'll have at least one gown worthy of Ashcroft House. You've already made arrangements? I was hopeful you'd accept. She pulled her hand back, but her expression softened slightly. You always were too certain of yourself? And you always saw right through me. For a moment, something sparked between them. Memory. Possibility. The ghost of who they might have been if the world had unfolded differently. Then Toby stirred on the bed, murmuring in his sleep, and the moment shattered. I should pack, Corisanda said, all business again. If we're to move today, I'll send carriages this afternoon, and servants to help. That's not necessary. Corisande. He waited until she met his eyes. Let me help you. That's the entire point of this arrangement. She held his gaze for a long moment, and he watched her pride war with her practicality. Finally, her shoulders released their tension. Fine, she said. Send your carriages, send your servants, but don't expect me to be grateful about it. I wouldn't dream of it. He bowed over her hand, proper and formal, then turned toward the door. He was halfway through it when her voice stopped him. Stellan. It was the first time she'd used his given name since he'd found her in the jeweler's shop. He turned back, pulse quickening. Thank you. The word seemed to cost her something. For the ring. For all of it. I know I haven't been gracious, but I am. I am not ungrateful. He inclined his head. Save your gratitude, Lady Hartwell. We've only just begun. He left before she could respond, walking down the narrow stairs and out into the London afternoon. The sun had broken through the clouds, painting the street in unexpected gold. Tomorrow evening, she would walk into Ashcroft House on his arm. Tomorrow evening, the game would truly begin. And God help him, he had no idea how it would end. Ashcroft House rose from the street like a monument to generations of wealth. Cream-colored stone, soaring columns, windows that gleamed in the afternoon light. Corisande stood on the pavement with Tobias clutching her hand, trying to remember how to breathe. Mama! Toby tugged at her fingers. Is this a palace? No, darling, it's just a house. It looks like a palace. It did. It looked like everything she'd lost, and everything she'd never quite had. The Hartwell townhouse had been grand enough, but this was something else entirely. This was the kind of house that announced its owner's importance to the world and dared anyone to challenge it. Lady Hartwell! A young woman burst through the front doors with the energy of a summer storm. She was perhaps 19, dark-haired and bright-eyed, with a warmth that seemed entirely at odds with the imposing facade behind her. I'm Ottilie. She seized both of Corisanda's hands before anyone could make proper introductions. Stellan told me everything. Well, not everything. He's dreadfully secretive. But enough. I'm so pleased you've come. This house has been an absolute tomb since Father died, and Mother is no help at all. She just sits in her rooms and plots marriages. But now you're here, and everything will be different. Corisande blinked, overwhelmed by the torrent of words. Lady Ottilie, just Ottilie, we're going to be the best of friends, I can tell. She crouched down to Toby's level, her smile softening. And who is this handsome gentleman? Tobias. Corisande rested a hand on her son's shoulder. Toby, make your bow to Lady Ottilie. Toby performed a creditable bow for a child his age, and Ottilie clapped her hands in delight. Perfect manners. Oh, he's wonderful. The nursery has been empty for ages, but I had the servants prepare it specially. There are tin soldiers and a rocking horse, and a view of the garden. Would you like to see? Toby looked up at his mother, eyes wide with cautious hope. Corisanda's throat tightened. How long since he'd had anything like tin soldiers or rocking horses? Go on, she said softly. I'll come find you soon. Ottilie took Toby's hand with easy grace and led him up the wide stone steps. The rocking horse is named Dobbins. He's been in the family for 3 generations. My brother used to ride him constantly. Crashed into a suit of armor once and nearly gave our nurse heart failure. Their voices faded into the house, and Corisande was left standing alone on the pavement, clutching her shabby reticule, feeling utterly out of place. My lady? A footman in Ashcroft livery appeared at her elbow, gesturing toward the door. Behind him, 2 more servants were unloading her meager belongings from the carriage. A single trunk, a hat box, a small case of Toby's things. It took them less than a minute. The contrast to the grand house made her want to disappear. She climbed the steps with as much dignity as she could muster, passing through doors held open by liveried servants, into an entrance hall that could have swallowed her rented rooms 3 times over. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching from gilded frames. Lady Hartwell, the voice came from above. Corisande looked up to find a woman descending the grand staircase with the measured pace of royalty. She was perhaps 55, silver-haired and elegant, dressed in mourning black that somehow conveyed authority rather than grief. Her blue eyes, the same blue as Stellan's, swept over Corisande with surgical precision. The Dowager Duchess of Ashcroft had arrived. Your Grace. Corisande curtsied, grateful her legs didn't tremble. So. The Dowager stopped 3 steps from the bottom, maintaining the advantage of height. You're the widow my son has decided to install in my home. Your son's home, I believe. The words escaped before Corisande could stop them. She saw the Dowager's eyes narrow and braced for the retaliation. Instead, a flicker of something. Surprise? Respect? Crossed the older woman's face. You have a tongue, the Dowager observed. Most women in your position would be groveling by now. Groveling has never served me well, Your Grace. Hasn't it? And yet, here you are, dependent on my son's charity, wearing last season's clothes, with nothing to your name but a child and a scandal. The words were designed to wound. Corisande felt each one land, but she refused to flinch. You're well informed about my circumstances. I make it my business to know everything about everyone who enters this house. The Dowager descended the final steps, bringing them eye to eye. My son believes he's being clever, using you to deflect my marriage schemes. He thinks I don't see through his little stratagem. And do you? I see everything, Lady Hartwell. The Dowager's smile was thin as a blade. The question is, what do I intend to do about it? She swept past Corisande without waiting for a response, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and unmistakable threat. Corisande stood alone in the vast entrance hall, her pulse racing against her ribs, and wondered what exactly she'd agreed to. The green guest suite was larger than any room Corisande had ever slept in. 4-poster bed with silk hangings in sage and ivory, writing desk by the window. A sitting room with its own fireplace, already crackling, windows overlooking the garden where she could see Toby running with Ottilie. He was laughing. She hadn't heard him laugh like that in months. The modiste will arrive within the hour, my lady. A young maid with copper hair and a smattering of freckles stood in the doorway. I'm Prue. I've been assigned as your lady's maid. That's not necessary. His Grace insisted. Prue moved into the room with practiced efficiency, opening the wardrobe to reveal nothing. The empty space seemed to mock Corisande's poverty. Madame Fiorelli is the finest dressmaker in London. She'll have you sorted in no time. Madame Fiorelli. Corisande had heard the name. Madame Fiorelli dressed duchesses and princesses. Her waiting list was rumored to be years long. "How did His Grace? His Grace has considerable influence, my lady." Prue's tone suggested this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Is there anything you need before she arrives? Tea? Biscuits? A bath, perhaps?" A bath. The thought of hot water and proper soap, instead of the lukewarm basin she'd grown accustomed to, made Corisande's eyes sting. A bath would be lovely indeed, she managed. An hour later, she sat wrapped in the softest dressing gown she'd ever touched, while Madame Fiorelli and her assistants swarmed around her with measuring tapes and fabric swatches. The modiste was a small, fierce woman, with silver-streaked hair and an accent that placed her origins somewhere in northern Italy. "The coloring is good," Madame Fiorelli pronounced, holding a swatch of deep garnet against Corisande's cheek. "Warm tones. Nothing too pale. You'll wash out. Rich colors. Jewel tones. The sapphire, yes, and this emerald. Cream for evening, but never white. I'm recently out of mourning," Corisande said. "Perhaps something more subdued." "Subdued?" Madame Fiorelli made a sound of profound disgust. "You are being presented to society on the arm of the Duke of Ashcroft. There is nothing subdued about that situation. You will dress accordingly." There was no arguing with that tone. Corisande submitted to the measurements, and the pinning, and the endless parade of silks and satins, trying not to calculate the cost of each fabric that Madame Fiorelli approved. "For tomorrow's dinner," the modiste said finally, holding up a length of midnight blue silk embroidered with tiny silver stars. "This one. Elegant, but not overwhelming. It says, 'I belong here,' without screaming for attention. It's beautiful." Corisande touched the fabric, almost afraid it would dissolve under her fingers. "But how can it possibly be ready by tomorrow?" "My girls will work through the night." Madame Fiorelli smiled, shark-like. "For the Duke of Ashcroft, miracles are simply a matter of adequate compensation." When the modiste finally departed with her entourage, Corisande sat in the window seat and stared out at the darkening garden. Somewhere in this vast house, her son was being fed and bathed and put to bed in a proper nursery with proper toys. Somewhere, servants were preparing a dinner she hadn't cooked and couldn't afford. Somewhere, the Duke was going about his business, having rearranged her entire life in a matter of hours. She thought of her mother, still living in those cramped rooms in Cheapside, taking in mending to make ends meet. She thought of her brother Jonathan, chasing schemes in the countryside, always promising that the next venture would be the one to restore their fortunes. She'd tried to help them both, but there was only so much one woman could do against the tide of misfortune. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in." It was Ottilie, still dressed for afternoon despite the late hour, her dark hair escaping its pins. "I wanted to check on you," she said, settling onto the window seat beside Corisande. "Mother can be overwhelming." She made her position very clear. "She doesn't hate you, you know. She's just frightened." Corisande turned to look at the younger woman. Frightened? Of me? Of losing Stellan? Ottilie drew her knees up, looking suddenly younger than her 19 years. Father's death devastated her. She'd never admit it. She'd rather die than admit weakness. But she's terrified of being alone. If Stellan marries someone she hasn't chosen, someone she doesn't understand, she loses her influence, her purpose. I'm not trying to marry your brother. Aren't you? Ottilie's eyes were sharper than Corisande expected. I know what this arrangement is, officially. A convenient fiction to keep Lady Margot at bay. But I also know my brother, and I've seen the way he looks at you. Corisande's breath caught. What way? Like you're something he's been searching for his whole life. Ottilie smiled softly. He never looked at anyone else like that. Not even close. We barely know each other. We danced a few times years ago. And he's never forgotten you. Never stopped wondering what happened to you when he found out you'd married Lord Hartwell. Ottilie trailed off, shaking her head. I've never seen him so affected. He disappeared to the country for 3 months, threw himself into estate business. When he came back, he was different. Harder. More controlled. The information landed like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything Corisanda thought she understood. He never said anything, she whispered. Back then, he never gave any indication. Stellan doesn't give indications. He waits. He watches. He decides. And then he acts with absolute certainty. Ottilie squeezed her hand. He's decided about you. Just don't dismiss it too quickly. She was gone before Corisande could respond, slipping out with a whispered, "Sleep well." Corisande sat alone in her beautiful borrowed room, surrounded by borrowed luxury, and wondered how she'd gone from selling her grandmother's ring to this in less than 48 hours. And she wondered, with a flutter of something dangerous in her chest, what exactly Stellan Ashcroft had decided. The midnight blue gown arrived at precisely 5 o'clock. It fit perfectly, hugging Corisanda's figure before flowing into a graceful skirt. The silver embroidery caught the candlelight, transforming each tiny star into a point of fire. You look like a queen, Prue breathed, arranging the final touches. A simple silver necklace, borrowed from Ottilie, and matching eardrops that swung gently when Corisanda moved. I look like a fraud. Nonsense. You look exactly like what you are. A beautiful woman who's been through hardship and emerged stronger. Prue stepped back to survey her work. The Duke won't be able to speak. The Duke, when Corisanda descended the staircase 20 minutes later, did in fact appear to have lost his words. He stood at the bottom in formal evening dress, dark and elegant and devastating, and his eyes tracked her progress step by step with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lady Hartwell," his voice was rougher than usual, "you look appropriate?" She couldn't help echoing his words from the jeweler's shop. Something flickered in his expression, amusement perhaps, or appreciation for the jab. "Exquisite." Before she could respond, Ottilie appeared in a flutter of rose silk. "Perfect. You're both perfect. The guests are starting to arrive. Lady Pemberton just pulled up, and I saw the Darnley carriage behind her. Come, come. We must greet everyone properly." The next hour was a blur of introductions and calculated conversation. 20 guests, just as Stellan had promised, each one carefully selected for their gossiping tendencies. Corisanda smiled until her face ached, made small talk until her throat was dry, and felt the weight of every curious gaze like a physical touch. They're wondering who I am. They're wondering what I'm doing here. They're already composing the letters they'll write tomorrow. And then Lady Margot Harcourt arrived. She swept into the drawing room like she owned it, dressed in pale gold silk that complemented her honey-colored hair and wide hazel eyes. Beautiful, luminous, the kind of woman who'd never known uncertainty about her place. "Your Grace." She curtsied to Stellan with practiced grace, then turned her smile toward Corisande. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "And you must be Lady Hartwell. I've heard so much about you. Lady Margot." Corisande kept her voice pleasant. "I hope the accounts weren't too dreadful. On the contrary, everyone's simply fascinated by your sudden appearance." Margot's head tilted, bird-like. No one knew the Duke had any connection to the Hartwell family. It came as quite a surprise. Happy surprises are the best kind, don't you think? Some surprises more than others. Margot's gaze swept over Corisanda's gown, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. What a charming dress. I don't believe I recognize the modiste. Madame Fiorelli. Coruscant watched satisfaction flicker across Stellan's face. I understand, she's rather exclusive. A tightness appeared around Margot's mouth. Madame Fiorelli had famously refused to dress Margot's mother last season. Too demanding, the modiste had declared. The slight still stung, apparently. How fortunate that she made an exception for you. Margot's tone was sugar-coated acid. The Duke's patronage opens so many doors, doesn't it? I've found that kindness opens more doors than patronage ever could. Coruscant smiled sweetly. But perhaps that's a distinction some people struggle to understand. Silence rippled through the nearby guests. Margot's cheeks flushed pink. Ladies, Stellan's voice cut through the tension, smooth as silk. I believe dinner is about to be announced. Lady Hartwell, may I escort you? He offered his arm, and Coruscant took it, acutely aware of every eye in the room tracking the gesture. Margot watched them pass with an expression that promised future retribution. At dinner, Coruscant was seated at Stellan's right hand, the position of honor, impossible to miss or misinterpret. Margot, relegated to the middle of the table, maintained a brittle smile throughout the meal, while her mother, the Viscountess Harcourt, shot daggers from her position near the Dowager Duchess. The Dowager herself said nothing, but her silence was its own message, watching, calculating, waiting. You're doing beautifully, Stellan murmured during a lull between courses. I'm terrified. It doesn't show. His hand brushed hers beneath the tablecloth, brief, warm, electric. Margot is already unsettled. Her mother is furious. By tomorrow morning, half of London will know that the Duke of Ashcroft has a new interest. Is that all this is? A performance to unsettle your enemies? He turned to look at her, and something in his eyes made her pulse stutter. You know it's not. Before she could respond, the lady on his other side claimed his attention, and Coruscant was left to manage conversation with Lord Darnley, a portly gentleman more interested in his wine than his dinner companions. But she felt Stellan's presence like heat radiating beside her. Every accidental brush of shoulders, every murmured comment shared between courses, every glance that lasted a heartbeat too long. After dinner, when the ladies withdrew to the drawing room, and the gentlemen remained with their port, Margot cornered her near the fireplace. A word of advice. Margot's voice was low enough that nearby conversations would mask it. Lady Hartwell, Coruscant, please. We're nearly family, after all. Margot's smile turned glacial. We are nothing of the sort. I don't know what game you're playing, but I've known the Duke since childhood. Our families have an understanding. Do they? His Grace hasn't mentioned any understanding to me. His Grace is temporarily distracted. Margot's eyes glittered. It happens sometimes. A pretty face, a sad story. Men are sentimental creatures. But sentimentality fades, and when it does, he'll remember where his duty lies. With you? With his family, his position, his legacy. Margot stepped closer. I can give him all of that. What can you give him? Debts? Scandal? A child that isn't his? The blow landed exactly as intended. Coruscant felt the blood drain from her face. I thought so. Margot's smile widened. Enjoy your moment in the sun, Lady Hartwell. It won't last long. She glided away, leaving Coruscant standing alone by the fireplace, her hands trembling, her carefully constructed composure cracking at the seams. The door opened, and the gentleman returned. Stellan crossed the room immediately, drawn to her like a compass finding north. What did she say to you? Nothing of consequence. You're lying. He studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. Your hands are shaking. It's been a long evening. Coruscant. His voice dropped to something softer. Whatever she said, She said that this won't last. Corisanda met his eyes, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. She said you're temporarily distracted. She said that when you remember your duty, you'll go back to her. She's wrong. Is she? The question escaped before she could stop it. Is she wrong, Stellan? Because from where I'm standing, she's saying exactly what your mother believes, what society believes, what I believe when I'm being honest with myself. He was quiet for a long moment. The drawing room hummed with conversation around them, but they stood in a bubble of silence, the rest of the world fading to insignificance. "Come with me," he said finally. "Where?" "Somewhere we can talk without an audience." He didn't wait for her agreement, simply took her hand and led her toward the doors that opened onto the terrace. The night air hit her like cold water, bracing, clarifying. Stars scattered across the dark sky, tiny points of light above the glow of London. "When you married Hartwell," Stellan said, "I thought I might die." Corisande went very still. "I'm not being dramatic." His voice was flat, factual, as if reporting weather conditions. "I mean that quite literally. I thought about walking into the sea, about riding until my horse collapsed, about any number of ways a man might stop existing without technically doing violence to himself. Stellan, I didn't, obviously. I'm not that brave, or that cowardly, depending on how you look at it." He turned to face her, his features carved sharp in the moonlight. "Instead, I buried myself in duty. Estate management, parliamentary business, the 1,000 tedious tasks required to be a proper duke. I told myself it would fade, that whatever I felt would diminish with time and distance. Did it? No. The word was simple, devastating. It never faded. It never diminished. I thought about you every day for 8 years. I wondered if you were happy, if Hartwell deserved you, if there was any version of the world where I might have done things differently. Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice cracked. "Back then, before I married. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was a fool." His laugh was bitter. "Because I thought there would be time. Because I didn't know Hartwell had already proposed until the engagement was announced, and by then it was too late." The revelation struck her like a physical blow. All those years of wondering why he'd never returned her interest, why those dances had led nowhere, why she'd eventually accepted Marcus Hartwell's proposal out of practicality rather than passion. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I had no idea you felt. How could you? I never told you. I just assumed you'd somehow divine my intentions and wait patiently for me to work up the courage." He shook his head. "The arrogance of it still astonishes me." They stood in silence, the weight of missed opportunities hanging between them like smoke. "So," Corisande said finally, "what happens now?" Stellan reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm around hers, solid and certain. "Now," he said, "we stop pretending this is just an arrangement." Her chest constricted. "Stellan, I'm not asking for anything tonight. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that this could be real, that whatever we're building together doesn't have to end when the season does. Your mother will never accept me. My mother will accept what I tell her to accept. Society will never forget what I am. A widow with debts, a scandal in silk. Then society can go hang." His grip on her hand tightened. "I spent 8 years wondering, what if? I'm not doing it again. Whatever obstacles exist, we face them together. Whatever people say, we prove them wrong. But only if you want this. Only if you're willing to try." The question hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous. Before Corisande could answer, the terrace doors opened behind them. "There you are." The Dowager Duchess's voice cut through the night like a blade of ice. "The guests are leaving. It's time to say goodnight." Stellan released Corasanda's hand, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. "We'll finish this conversation tomorrow," he said quietly. "Will we?" "Count on it." He turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Coruscant alone on the terrace with his mother's sharp gaze boring into her back. "You're playing a dangerous game," the Dowager said softly. "I hope you understand what you're risking." "With respect, Your Grace," Coruscant replied. "I've already lost everything once. There's nothing left to risk." She walked past the older woman without waiting for a response, her chin high, her blood racing, and the echo of Stellan's words burning through her veins. This could be real. She just had to be brave enough to let it. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of social engagements. Morning calls with Ottilie, afternoon promenades in Hyde Park, where Stellan walked beside her, with his hand at the small of her back. Evening entertainments, dinners, musicals, a ball at the Pemberton residence, where they danced together just often enough to fuel speculation. And through it all, Toby flourished. Coruscant watched her son transform from a cautious, withdrawn child into someone who laughed freely and ran through the garden and demanded bedtime stories with the imperious confidence of a prince. He'd attached himself to Stellan with alarming speed, trailing the Duke through the house, begging to see his horses, asking endless questions about everything from constellations to cricket. "He's never had a father figure," she told Ottilie one afternoon, watching from the window as Stellan lifted Toby onto the back of his gentlest mare. Marcus was distant, even before the drinking got bad. "Stellan was the same with our father." Ottilie joined her at the window. "He worshipped him. When father died, I think part of Stellan died too. He doesn't talk about it. He doesn't talk about anything that matters. That's his way." Ottilie glanced at her sideways. "But he talks to you, more than he's talked to anyone in years." It was true. In the quiet hours after social engagements, when the house was dark and the servants had retired, Stellan would find her in the library. They'd sit by the fire and talk about books, about politics, about memories and regrets, and the strange turns life could take. He told her about his father's final days, about the crushing weight of inheriting a dukedom at 25, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted something from him. She told him about Marcus, about the charming man she'd married and the stranger he'd become, about finding gambling debts hidden in desk drawers, about jewelry disappearing piece by piece, about the night he'd come home so drunk he hadn't recognized her, and she'd locked herself in the nursery with Toby until morning. "I should have left," she said one night, staring into the flames. "I knew things were wrong. I just couldn't face the scandal. Couldn't face admitting I'd made such a terrible mistake." "You survived." Stellan's voice was soft. "That's not a mistake. That's strength. Is it? Sometimes it feels like cowardice. Cowardice would have been giving up. You didn't give up. You protected your son. You held your family together. And when everything fell apart, you found a way forward." He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. "That's not cowardice. That's courage." His touch sent warmth flooding through her veins. These stolen moments had become the axis around which her days revolved. The quiet conversations, the accidental brushes of contact, and the looks that lasted a heartbeat too long. She was falling for him. She knew it with the certainty of someone watching disaster approach and being powerless to stop it. Every day the arrangement felt less like performance and more like truth. Every night she lay awake, wondering what would happen when the season ended, and she had to walk away. The Thornwood Ball was the grandest event of the season. 500 guests, 3 orchestras. Coruscant wore deep emerald silk, a color Madame Fiorelli had declared triumphant, with diamonds borrowed from Ottilie. "You're stunning," Stellan said when she descended the staircase, and the raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "You're biased." "I'm observant. There's a difference." At the ball, they danced the first waltz together. By now, society had accepted, or at least stopped openly questioning, the Duke's interest in the mysterious widow. Margot Harcourt still watched from the sidelines, her smile fixed and sharp, but her influence had waned. The Viscountess Harcourt had stopped accepting invitations to events where Coruscant would be present, a retreat that spoke louder than any declaration. "They're starting to believe it," Coruscant murmured as they turned across the floor. "That this is real. It is real." Stellan's hand tightened at her waist. "At least for me." "Stellan, I know we said we'd talk. I know there are things to decide. But tonight, can we just be here? Can we pretend, just for a few hours, that there are no obstacles, no complications? Just us?" She should say no. She should remind him of all the reasons this couldn't work, all the ways it would inevitably fall apart. Instead, she leaned into his embrace and let the music carry them. Later, when the dancing had paused and guests had scattered through the Thornwood Mansion's elaborate gardens, Stellan led her to a secluded alcove behind a fountain. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees above. The sound of water masked their conversation from any potential eavesdroppers. "I have something for you." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. Coruscant's breath faltered. "Stellan, if that's... It's not a ring." He opened the box to reveal a pendant, a single sapphire, deep blue and brilliant, set in delicate silver filigree. "I had it made from your grandmother's ring. The original setting was damaged, but the stone..." He lifted the pendant, letting it catch the light. "The stone was perfect. I thought you might want to wear it, rather than keeping it locked away." Her vision blurred with sudden moisture. The sapphire, her grandmother's sapphire, the last piece of her old life, transformed into something new. Something beautiful, something she could carry with her instead of mourning what she'd lost. "Turn around," Stellan said softly. She obeyed, lifting her hair so he could fasten the chain around her neck. His fingers brushed her nape, sending shivers cascading down her spine. When she turned back, the sapphire rested just above her heart. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect." His hand cupped her face, tilting it toward him. "Coruscant, I know this started as an arrangement. I know you agreed for practical reasons, not because you wanted me. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just strategy. I can't pretend that watching you with Toby doesn't make me want things I'd given up hoping for. I can't pretend that every moment with you isn't the best part of my day." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you." The words fell between them like stones into still water. "I've loved you for 8 years. I loved you when you married someone else. I loved you through every empty season, every failed attempt to forget. And I love you now, more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. Stellan, you don't have to say anything. I don't expect you to feel the same. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens from here, whatever you decide, I needed you to know the truth." She stared at him. This man who'd pulled her from the wreckage of her life, who'd given her son a home and her heart a reason to keep beating. This man who'd loved her in silence for nearly a decade and never once demanded anything in return. "I'm terrified," she said. "Of what?" "Of believing this is real. Of letting myself hope and having it ripped away. Of loving you and losing you, the way I've lost everything else. You won't lose me. You can't promise that. I can promise to fight for you, to fight for us. Every day, for as long as you'll let me." He stepped closer, his forehead resting against hers. "Can that be enough, for now?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, questioning. Then his arms came around her, and it deepened into something urgent, something that had been building for weeks, for years, for a lifetime of wondering what might have been. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Stellan's eyes blazed with something that made her knees weak. "That," he said roughly, "is not the response of a woman who's terrified. Maybe I'm brave after all. Maybe you are." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Come home with me. We'll figure out the rest together." She took his hand, the sapphire warm against her heart, and let him lead her back toward the light. Neither of them saw Margot Harcourt watching from the shadows, her face twisted with fury, already composing the letter that would change everything. The summons came 3 days later. Coruscant was in the nursery with Toby, helping him arrange his tin soldiers into battle formations, when Prue appeared in the doorway with a face like chalk. "The Dowager requests your presence in the morning room, my lady. Immediately." Something in her tone made Coruscant's stomach plummet. She kissed Toby's forehead, promised to return soon, and followed Prue down the stairs with her chest tight with dread. The morning room was full. The Dowager sat in her chair, expression carved from ice. Stellan stood by the fireplace, jaw tight. And beside him, Coruscant stopped in the doorway. Lord Wyndham, Marcus's older brother, the man who'd inherited the Hartwell title after Marcus's death, the man who'd refused to help her. "Lady Hartwell." Lord Wyndham smiled, and the expression made her skin crawl. "How delightful to see you again. You're looking remarkably well, considering your circumstances. What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steady, though her hands were trembling. "I was invited." He glanced at the Dowager. "Her Grace was kind enough to contact me after receiving some rather disturbing information about your presence in this household." "What information?" The Dowager spoke for the first time. "Lady Margot Harcourt came to see me yesterday. She was quite distraught. She claimed to have witnessed improprieties between you and my son at the Thornwood Ball." The kiss. Someone had seen the kiss. "Whatever Lady Margot claims to have seen," Coruscant began, "is irrelevant," Stellan cut in. "My relationship with Lady Hartwell is none of Margot's concern, nor anyone else's." "Your relationship?" The Dowager's voice could have frozen fire. "So, there is a relationship, beyond the convenient fiction of friendship you've been peddling." "Yes." Stellan met his mother's gaze without flinching. "I love her. I intend to marry her, and nothing you say will change that." The words should have filled Coruscant with joy. Instead, they filled her with dread, because Lord Wyndham's smile had widened. "How touching," Wyndham drawled. "The Duke and the penniless widow. It's practically a fairy tale." He turned to the Dowager. "I assume you've told him about the debts?" "What debts?" Stellan's eyes narrowed. "The debts your little paramour failed to mention." Wyndham withdrew a sheaf of papers from his coat. "My brother was a fool with money, but he was clever about one thing. He made sure his wife signed every note. Every gambling debt, every loan, every IOU. They're all in her name as well as his." Coruscant's blood turned to ice. "That's not true. I never signed—" "Forgeries are such simple things, aren't they?" Wyndham's smile was sharp as a blade. "Especially when one has access to a wife's correspondence, her signature, her seal. You forged my name?" "I merely discovered documents that had been previously overlooked." He spread the papers across the table. £17,000 in debt, as I'm sure you've told the Duke. But what you perhaps neglected to mention is that the terms of these loans include a rather specific clause. He pointed to a line of text, and Corasande's breath seized in her throat. In the event of default, Wyndham read aloud, the creditor may claim any dependents of the debtor as wards of the court, to be placed under the guardianship of the nearest male relative. No. The word tore from Corasande's throat. No, you can't. I can, actually. As the current Lord Hartwell, I am Tobias's nearest male relative. If you cannot pay these debts, and we both know you cannot, I have every legal right to petition for custody of the boy. Stellan moved so fast, Corisande barely saw it. One moment he was by the fireplace. The next, he had Wyndham by the throat, slamming him against the wall. If you touch that child, Stellan, the dowager rose from her chair. Release him immediately. He's threatening my son. Tobias is not your son. Wyndham's voice was strangled but triumphant. He's a Hartwell, and unless your little widow can produce 17,000 pounds by the end of the week, he'll be a Hartwell living under my roof. Stellan's grip tightened. For a terrible moment, Corisande thought he might actually kill the man. Then, with visible effort, he released Wyndham and stepped back. I'll pay the debts, he said flatly. Today. In full. Name your bank. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Wyndham straightened his cravat, his composure returning. You see, the debts are owed to me now. I purchased them from the original creditors, and I'm not interested in money. Then what do you want? Wyndham's eyes slid to Corisande. I want her to disappear, to leave London, leave England, leave you. To take her spawn and vanish into whatever obscurity she came from, never to contact you or anyone in your family again. Why? Corisande's voice was barely a whisper, because I was promised the Duke's support for a parliamentary bill that would have made me very wealthy indeed. Lady Margot assured me that her engagement to His Grace was a certainty, and that once she was Duchess, she would ensure her husband's cooperation. Wyndham's smile turned vicious. You have disrupted that arrangement. I want you gone. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then the dowager spoke, and her words shattered something in Corisande's chest. Perhaps, she said slowly, Lord Wyndham has a point. Mother, Stellan started. Think, Stellan. The dowager's eyes were hard. This woman has brought nothing but complications into our lives. Debts, scandal, now threats against a child. Is this truly what you want? A lifetime of chaos and uncertainty, all for the sake of infatuation? It's not infatuation. Then prove it. The dowager's voice cut like glass. Let her go. Pay the debts, secure the child's safety, and let her go. If what you feel is truly love, it will survive the separation. And if it doesn't, she shrugged elegantly, then you'll have your answer. Corisande couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, the walls closing in. She'd known it couldn't last. She'd known the fairy tale would end. But she hadn't expected it to end like this, with her son's safety held hostage, with Stellan's own mother urging him to abandon her. No. Stellan's voice was quiet, but absolute. I won't abandon her. I won't let you use her child as leverage. And I certainly won't let this snake— He jerked his chin toward Wyndham. Dictate the course of my life. Then you leave me no choice. The dowager stood, her face a mask of aristocratic displeasure. I've already sent word to my solicitors. As of this morning, I've revoked your access to the dowager accounts and frozen the assets I control. You'll receive no further support from me until this situation is resolved to my satisfaction. You can't. I can. I just did. She swept toward the door. I suggest you consider your priorities carefully, Stellan. Some choices cannot be unmade. She was gone before he could respond. Wyndham gathered his papers with leisurely satisfaction. "You have until Friday, Lady Hartwell. 4 days. I'm sure that's enough time to pack." He followed the Dowager out, leaving Stellan and Coruscant alone in the morning room's devastating silence. "I'll fix this." Stellan reached for her, but she stepped back. "How? Your mother has frozen your assets. Wyndham has Toby's custody as leverage. There's no path forward that doesn't— There's always a path forward. Not this time," her voice cracked. "This time, the only way to protect my son is to leave. Coruscant, he's right, don't you see? As long as I'm here, Toby is in danger. Wyndham won't stop. Your mother won't accept me. The scandal will never die." She felt moisture streaming down her cheeks. The only way to save him is to disappear, to give them what they want. And what about what you want? What about what I want? She looked at him, this man she loved, this man who'd given her everything, and felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Sometimes wanting isn't enough. She turned and fled before he could stop her, already knowing what she had to do. She packed in the dark. 2 bags, one for her, one for Toby. Only essentials: clothing, documents, the sapphire pendant. Everything else would stay. Toby cried when she woke him, cried harder when she told him they were leaving. "But I don't want to go. I want to stay with Stellan." "I know, darling." She held him close. "But we have to go. Why isn't it safe? Did I do something wrong?" "No, my love. You didn't do anything wrong. This is adult trouble. Grown-up things that don't make sense. Will we come back?" She couldn't answer. She just held him tighter and tried not to fall apart. The carriage she'd hired was waiting in the mews behind the house. She'd paid the driver extra to come at midnight, when the household was asleep. Prue had helped her slip out through the servants' entrance, her own eyes wet as she pressed a small purse of coins into Coruscant's hand. "From Lady Ottilie," Prue whispered. "She wanted you to have it, in case you need it." Ottilie, sweet, kind Ottilie, who'd welcomed her without judgment and called her sister. Another person Coruscant was abandoning. She left a letter on her pillow, 3 pages of explanation and apology, and goodbye that felt utterly inadequate. She'd written a separate note for Toby to give to Stellan someday, when he was old enough to understand. She hoped he never would be. The carriage rattled through dark London streets. Her cousin Marjorie lived in Bristol, a widow herself, with a small house and a kind heart. She'd offered refuge after Marcus's death. At the time, pride made Coruscant refuse. Now, pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. They would go to Bristol. They would disappear. And eventually, the scandal would fade, and Stellan would move on, and Toby would be safe. It was the right choice, the only choice. So why did it feel like dying? 3 days later, Coruscant stood in Marjorie's small parlor, staring out the window at the gray Bristol rain, and felt nothing at all. The numbness had settled over her like a shroud. She went through the motions, eating when Marjorie insisted, sleeping when exhaustion overwhelmed her, playing with Toby when he demanded attention. But inside, she was hollow, empty, a shell of the woman she'd been. Toby was adjusting, as children do. He asked about Stellan less often now, distracted by the novelty of Marjorie's garden and the neighbor's cat. He didn't understand why they'd left, but he'd accepted it with the resilience of youth. Soon, he would forget. Soon, Ashcroft House would be nothing but a faded memory, a dream he couldn't quite recall. Coruscant envied him that. "You need to eat something." Marjorie appeared beside her with a cup of tea. "You've barely touched food in 3 days." "I'm not hungry." "Hunger isn't the point. You're wasting away, and that boy of yours needs his mother, healthy and whole, not fading into shadow." Coruscant took the tea, more to stop the lecture than from any desire for it. "I'm fine." You're the opposite of fine. You're broken." Marjorie settled into the chair across from her, her weathered face gentle but firm. "Whatever happened in London, whoever that Duke was, it's eating you alive. I made the right choice." "Did you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who ran away rather than fight." "I was protecting my son." "Were you? Or were you protecting yourself?" Marjorie leaned forward. "I've been a widow for 15 years, Coruscant. I know what it means to lose someone you love, to rebuild your life from ashes, to make hard choices in the dark. But I also know the difference between necessary sacrifice and unnecessary martyrdom. You don't understand? Then make me understand. Tell me what happened. Tell me why you're here, crying into your tea at midnight, when a man who clearly loves you is probably tearing London apart trying to find you." Coruscant opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Then, slowly, haltingly, she told Marjorie everything. When she finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment. "So," Marjorie said finally, "you left because his mother disapproved, and a scheming villain threatened you. I left because Toby's safety. Toby's safety was threatened by one man, one despicable, greedy man. And instead of fighting him, instead of letting the Duke help you fight him, you ran." Marjorie's voice softened. "I understand the impulse. I do. When Edmund died and the creditors came, I wanted to run too. But running doesn't solve problems, child. It just delays them. What else could I do? Wyndham had the law on his side. Wyndham had forged documents and empty threats. A good solicitor would have shredded his case in hours. But you didn't stay long enough to find out, did you? You saw the danger and you fled, just like you fled your marriage, just like you fled every hard thing in your life." The words landed like a slap. Coruscant recoiled. "That's not fair." "It's perfectly fair. It's also perfectly true." Marjorie reached out and took her hand. "You are strong, Coruscant. Stronger than you know. You survived a terrible marriage, protected your son, and rebuilt your life from nothing. But somewhere along the way, you started believing you didn't deserve good things. That happiness was for other people, not for you. I don't... You do. I see it in your eyes. You found a man who loves you, who wants to fight for you, who would burn the world down to keep you safe. And you left him. Not because he failed you, but because you couldn't believe he wouldn't." Moisture spilled down Coruscant's cheeks. "He deserves better than me. He deserves to make that choice himself, and so do you." Marjorie squeezed her hand. "Go back, child. Go back and fight. Whatever obstacles exist, face them together. Because I promise you, whatever pain comes from trying is nothing compared to the pain of wondering what might have been." Coruscant closed her eyes, her mother's words echoing through memory. "Don't let fear steal this from you." "I don't know how to go back," she whispered. "The same way you left. One step at a time." Before Coruscant could respond, a thunderous knocking shook the front door. Marjorie rose, frowning. "Who on earth?" She opened the door, and Coruscant's breath seized in her chest. Stellan stood on the threshold, rain-soaked and wild-eyed, looking like a man who'd ridden through hell to reach her. "You," he said, his voice cracking, "are the most infuriating woman I have ever known." He was really here. Coruscant stood frozen in the parlor doorway, unable to process the sight of him. Stellan, Duke of Ashcroft, dripping rainwater onto Marjorie's worn carpet, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "How did you find me?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Your maid, Prue. She held out for almost a full day before she cracked." He stepped into the house, ignoring Marjorie's startled protests. Bristol. You came to Bristol, of all places. Do you have any idea how many coaches I've intercepted in the past 3 days? How many inns I've searched? Stellan, I went to your mother's boarding house. Empty. I went to every address your brother Jonathan mentioned. Nothing. I was halfway to Scotland before Prue told me about your cousin. He stopped in front of her. 3 days of not knowing where you were. 3 days of imagining the worst. I left a letter. Your letter said goodbye. It said, don't follow. It said, forget me. His voice broke. Did you really think I could do that? After everything? I thought it was the only way to protect Toby. It wasn't. It isn't. He reached into his coat and withdrew a sheaf of papers. Wyndham's claims were fraudulent. Every single one. My solicitor confirmed it within hours of examining the documents. The signatures were forged. The dates were wrong. Half the debts had already been settled by Marcus's estate. Wyndham was bluffing. Corasanda's knees went weak. What? He had nothing. No legal standing. No legitimate claims. No power whatsoever. If you'd stayed one more day, we would have destroyed him. The magnitude of it crashed over her like a wave. She'd run for nothing. She'd broken her own heart, broken his heart, and uprooted her son. All for nothing. I didn't know. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. I thought, he seemed so certain. He was desperate. Margot's scheme was falling apart. His parliamentary bill was dead. And you were the convenient target. Stellan's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. But none of that matters now. What matters is that I found you. What matters is that you're safe. What matters is that I love you. And nothing, not Wyndham, not my mother, not the entire bloody aristocracy, is going to change that. Your mother has been dealt with. A grim smile crossed his features. Ottilie threatened to elope with a stable hand if she didn't relent. It was magnificent. Despite everything, a broken laugh escaped Corisande. Ottilie would never. Mother didn't know that. She folded within minutes. The frozen assets are restored. Her objections have been officially withdrawn, and she's currently composing a letter of apology to you that I suspect will be the most painful thing she's ever written. And Wyndham? Facing criminal charges for fraud and extortion. I have very good solicitors. Stellan's thumb brushed away her tears. It's over, Corisanda. All of it. The only question that remains is whether you're willing to come home. Home. The word wrapped around her heart like a promise. I'm scared, she admitted. I've been scared for so long that I don't know how to stop. Every time I let myself hope, something terrible happens. Every time I believe things might be good, they fall apart. Then let me be scared with you. Let me carry some of that weight. His forehead rested against hers. I don't need you to be fearless. I just need you to be here, to try, to let me love you without running away. I don't know if I know how to do that. Neither do I. We'll learn together. Marjorie cleared her throat from the doorway. I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a small boy upstairs who heard a commotion and is asking if the horseman has come to visit. Stellan laughed, a real laugh, warm and bright, and something in Corisande's chest finally unclenched. May I? He asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He took the stairs 2 at a time, and moments later, she heard Toby's shriek of delight, followed by the deeper rumble of Stellan's voice. Her son, the man she loved, together, despite everything. Well, Marjorie appeared beside her. Are you going back? Corisande looked at the stairs where Stellan had disappeared, where her son's laughter still echoed, where her future waited if she was brave enough to claim it. Yes, she said. I'm going home. The journey back to London took 2 days. They traveled together in Stellan's carriage, the 3 of them plus Marjorie, who declared she wasn't missing the culmination of the most romantic disaster she'd ever witnessed. Toby sat between Stellan and Corisanda, chattering endlessly about horses and tin soldiers, and whether there would be biscuits for tea. But as the carriage rolled into London and Ashcroft House came into view, Corisanda's stomach tightened with dread. "She'll be waiting," she said quietly, watching the imposing facade approach. "Yes," Stellan took her hand, "but this time, you're not facing her alone." The Dowager Duchess received them in the main drawing room, seated in her customary chair, like a queen preparing to pass judgment. Ottilie stood by the window, bouncing with barely contained excitement. And to Corisanda's surprise, a third figure was present, an elderly man in legal robes, his face lined with decades of wisdom. "Lady Hartwell." The Dowager's voice was cool but not hostile. "I see my son found you." "Your Grace," Corisanda curtsied. "I apologize for any distress my departure caused." "Your departure caused great distress. My son was quite unbearable." The Dowager's lips thinned. "I've been informed that my concerns about your suitability were manipulated by parties with ulterior motives." "Wyndham and Lady Margot," Stellan supplied. "Indeed. It seems I was deceived." The words seemed to cost the Dowager something. "I do not enjoy being deceived." "No one does, Your Grace." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she gestured to the man in legal robes. "This is Mr. Whitmore, head of the Ashcroft family solicitors. I've asked him here to witness a formal statement." She drew a breath. "Lady Hartwell, I owe you an apology." The room went silent. "I allowed my fear of change, my desire to control my son's future, to blind me to the truth of his feelings. I listened to gossip and scheming instead of trusting my own observations." The Dowager's hands clenched in her lap. "You are not what I would have chosen for him, but you are clearly what he has chosen for himself. And I have decided to respect that choice." Corisanda's throat tightened. "Your Grace." "I'm not finished." The Dowager held up a hand. "My late husband taught me that love is not a weakness, though I spent years trying to forget that lesson. Watching my son these past days, watching him search for you, fight for you, refuse to give up, I was reminded of what I'd chosen to forget." She rose from her chair and crossed to where Corisande stood. "I will never be warm," the Dowager said quietly. "It's not in my nature. But I can be fair, and I can recognize courage when I see it. You have courage, Lady Hartwell. You've survived things that would have broken lesser women. That deserves acknowledgement. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop running." The Dowager's eyes held something that might have been warmth. "Say you'll stay, and let my son make you happy. Say you'll give that child of yours a real family." Corisanda looked at Stellan, who watched with something like wonder on his face. She looked at Ottilie, who was literally vibrating with joy. She looked at Toby, who'd fallen asleep on the settee, exhausted from travel, completely oblivious to the magnitude of the moment. "I'll stay," she said. "I'll stop running. I'll try to be worthy of all of this." "You already are," Stellan said softly. The Dowager nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Then I believe we have a wedding to plan." "Wedding?" Corisanda blinked. "You don't think I'm allowing my son to continue this arrangement without proper resolution, do you? There will be a wedding, a grand one. Society will attend. They will witness the Duke of Ashcroft marry the woman he loves. And anyone who dares to whisper about her past will answer to me personally." It was, Corisande realized, the Dowager's version of acceptance. Imperious and demanding, yes, but genuine. The older woman was offering her protection, her support, her name. "Thank you," Corisande managed. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Don't thank me yet. Wedding planning with me is a special form of torment." But there was a ghost of a smile on the dowager's lips as she swept from the room. Ottilie threw herself at Corisanda the moment her mother was gone. "I knew it. I knew she'd come around. She's been miserable since you left. Don't tell her I said that. But she has. She missed you too. Ottilie, we're going to be sisters. Proper sisters. Oh, there's so much to do. We need to decide colors and flowers, and whether the cathedral can accommodate 500 guests. Perhaps give her a moment to breathe," Stellan suggested dryly. Ottilie released Corisanda with obvious reluctance. "Fine, but only a moment. We have a wedding to plan." She bounded from the room, leaving Stellan and Corisanda alone, except for the sleeping child. "So," Stellan said, moving toward her, "it seems you're marrying me. It seems I have no choice. Your mother has decreed it. I could always defy her if you prefer." His arms slid around her waist. "We could elope. Scotland is lovely this time of year." And miss the chance to see the Dowager Duchess plan a wedding? Never. He laughed and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed emotion. "I love you," he said. "I loved you when you were selling your grandmother's ring. I loved you when you were negotiating terms like a soldier. I loved you when you ran, and I love you now that you're staying. I'm going to love you for the rest of my life, and I'm going to spend every day proving it." "That," Corisanda said, "sounds like a worthy endeavor." She kissed him again, the sapphire pendant warm against her heart, and let herself finally completely believe. The wedding took place on a brilliant September morning, in the cathedral that had hosted Ashcroft weddings for 300 years. 500 guests filled the pews. Society's finest craned their necks for a glimpse of the mysterious widow who'd captured the Duke's heart. Corisande walked down the aisle in ivory silk, the sapphire pendant her only jewelry, her hand steady in her brother's arm. Jonathan had cleaned himself up remarkably well, sober now for 3 months, working as an estate manager in Kent. He wiped his eyes when he saw her. Stellan waited at the altar, his face open with emotion in a way she'd never seen before. He didn't look like a duke in that moment. He looked like a man who'd finally found his way home. The vows were simple, traditional, ancient words spoken with new meaning. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a band of sapphires that matched her pendant, she felt something click into place. Something that had been broken for years, finally made whole. After the ceremony, they stood together in the cathedral's garden, while guests streamed past with congratulations. "Well," Stellan murmured, "you've done it now. You're stuck with me." The horror. The absolute horror. He pulled her closer. "My mother is already planning nursery renovations. I believe she expects grandchildren immediately." "Your mother can wait," Corisanda smiled. "We have a lifetime to figure things out." Speaking of figuring things out, Stellan reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. "I have a wedding gift for you." "Another one?" "This one's different." He opened the box to reveal a key. Old iron, ornate, heavy with significance. "It's the key to Thornfield Manor, the Ashcroft country estate. I've had it refurbished. New nursery, new gardens, stables for horses that Toby can learn to ride properly. Stellan, there's also a cottage on the property. I've given it to your mother, along with a pension. She'll want for nothing for the rest of her life." Moisture pricked at Corisanda's eyes. "You didn't have to. I wanted to. I want to give you everything. I want to spend my life making up for every hard thing you've ever endured." He kissed her forehead. "You're my family now. All of you. And family takes care of each other." She threw her arms around him, not caring who was watching, not caring about propriety or gossip or anything except this moment, this man, this impossible joy. 1 year later, the jewelry shop had a new name now. Coruscant stood outside Thornberry and Ashcroft Jewelers, watching through the window as Stellan examined a tray of emeralds with careful attention. Beside him, Toby pressed his nose to the glass case, fascinated by the glittering display. The shop had been Stellan's idea, a partnership with old Mr. Thornberry, who'd retired to the country with a generous pension, a legitimate business that hired widows and struggling women, trained them as jewelers and gemologists, gave them skills and futures they'd never dreamed of having. "For you," Stellan had said when he'd proposed the idea. "So no woman ever has to stand at a counter selling her grandmother's ring again." Inside, Toby spotted her through the window and waved frantically. Stellan looked up, and his face transformed into the smile that still made her pulse quicken. She pushed open the door, the bell chiming overhead, the same bell that had chimed 1 year ago, when everything changed. "Mama!" Toby raced toward her. "Stellan says I can help pick grandmother's birthday present. He says emeralds match her eyes, but I think she likes rubies better. Which do you think?" "I think grandmother will love whatever you choose." Corisanda ruffled his hair, marveling as always at how much he'd grown. Nearly 7 years old now, confident and happy, calling Stellan father more often than not. Stellan crossed to her, sliding an arm around her waist. "You look tired." "I feel wonderful." She leaned into him. "Dr. Pemberton confirmed it this morning." His whole body went still. "Confirmed. February, he thinks. Perhaps March." The expression on his face, wonder, joy, a touch of fear, overwhelming love, was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd ever endured. "A baby," he breathed. "A baby." She smiled. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" He laughed, pulling her close. "I'm terrified, and delighted, and so absurdly grateful I don't have words for it. Maybe start with, 'I love you.' I love you." He kissed her, gentle and reverent. "I love you. I love you. I'll never stop saying it." "Good," she kissed him back, "because I'm never going to stop needing to hear it." Outside, London bustled past. Somewhere in Ashcroft House, the Dowager was terrorizing servants over dinner arrangements. Ottilie was planning another charity event. Marjorie was visiting from Bristol. Family. Complicated, messy, wonderful family. Corisande leaned against her husband, watched her son deliberate carefully over gemstones, and let herself feel something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Complete. "Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist. Because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.